The Las Vegas Raiders have officially lost to the Denver Broncos, and there's a lot to talk about from this game. We'll break down what we saw, what we expected, and how the players performed on both offense and defense. Plus, we'll dive into updates on the Raiders' draft position. It's moved up a spot, and touch on some quarterback news later. First, let's focus on the Raiders versus Broncos game. It was a close one. The Raiders actually looked strong in the first half, leading 13-9. They seemed like the better team early on. Unfortunately, things took a turn when a key interception changed the momentum. On that play, the quarterback, Gardner Minshew, was hit as he threw the ball. This caused the pass to go high, leading to an interception. Later, Desmond Ridder also fumbled toward the end of the game, which didn't help. Despite those setbacks, the Raiders' offense showed improvement. A few plays could have made a big difference, but overall, they played better than they have in some previous games. That's one of the main things fans wanted to see: progress. Looking ahead, it's worth noting that Antonio Pierce is expected to stay on as the Raiders' head coach next season. Some may argue for a change, but it seems there's about a 75% chance Pierce will return. If that's the case, the team needs to figure out who their offensive coordinator will be. Scott Turner has done a decent job so far in his first two games. While the Raiders haven't scored a ton of points, there have been signs of improvement. When the Raiders draft a new quarterback, which is likely, they'll need someone who can help develop them. Turner might stay in that role, or the Raiders could look elsewhere for someone experienced, depending on which coaches become available in the offseason. The main challenge for the Raiders has been converting drives into touchdowns. Against the Broncos, they kicked 4 field goals and scored only 1 touchdown. If just 2 of those field goals had been touchdowns, it could have been a very different game. Imagine if instead of kicking 4 field goals, the Raiders had converted 2 of those into touchdowns. That's an extra 8 points added to their 19, making it a much tighter game. While it doesn't always work out that perfectly, upgrading from an average quarterback like Gardner Minshew to someone better could make all the difference. Think about quarterbacks like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. A stronger quarterback often converts those crucial third and long plays, something we saw with the Broncos' rookie quarterback, Bo Nix. Today, Nix stood out. He wasn't just managing the game. He was making big plays, stepping up in 3rd and 10 situations, staying calm in the pocket, and pushing the ball downfield. It's tough to admit as a Raiders fan, but credit where it's due. Nix looks promising. He's young, but he's already helping the Broncos put up 29 points in this game. Let's not forget, the Broncos struggled last year, and the only major change they made was drafting a rookie quarterback. That single decision has transformed their offense. For the Raiders, it's a different story. Quarterbacks like Minshew and Desmond Ridder just haven't been able to consistently deliver. When the team chose not to prioritize drafting a quarterback, they essentially accepted these limitations. Minshew also suffered an injury today, possibly a collarbone issue, though we're waiting for confirmation. If he's out, Aiden McConnell might return in the next 2 weeks, which could give us a glimpse of his potential as the season winds down. Looking ahead, it's clear the Raiders must address the quarterback position in the offseason. Drafting one seems necessary, but this year's quarterback class doesn't look very strong. Some of the top prospects might even return to college, which complicates things further. This game against the Broncos wasn't just about the loss. It was a test for the Raiders' offense. They faced a strong Broncos defense, and while there were flashes of promise, they struggled to execute when it mattered most. The Raiders showed some improvement in their run game this week. Zamir McCormack had 5 carries for 33 yards, and as a team, they averaged 4.3 yards per carry. If you exclude the quarterback's 3 carries for 8 yards, that average would be even higher. Overall, it was a solid performance on the ground. In the air, the Raiders combined for 328 passing yards. Jacoby Myers had a standout game with 121 receiving yards, while Trey Tucker also contributed with 7 catches for 82 yards. Tucker made a great 28-yard catch toward the end, although he didn't get out of bounds. It's nice to see these two stepping up. Last week, the team heavily relied on Brock Bowers, targeting him 15 times. This week, the Broncos' defense focused on shutting him down. Bowers was targeted around 8 times, but managed only 4 catches for 38 yards. However, this opened opportunities for Jacoby and Trey, who combined for over 200 yards on 17 catches. A highlight of the game was a bold fake punt. The special teams executed it perfectly, with the punter faking a play to the left while Divine Diablo slipped to the right and caught the ball, taking it 34 yards. It was a creative call by the coaches and one of the game's bright moments. Defensively, the Raiders struggled, but injuries played a big role. Key players like Christian Wilkins, Malcolm Kuntz, and Marcus Epps were out, along with 2 starting cornerbacks. Jack Jones, who was questionable coming into the game, gave it a go but had a tough outing. He made a few good plays against the run but got beaten in coverage a couple of times, including giving up a touchdown. Despite the challenges, there were some positives. Max Crosby made a few standout plays, silencing some of the criticism he's faced. Tyree Wilson also recorded a sack, and the defensive line generated pressure at times. The biggest issue for the Raiders' defense remains their inability to force turnovers. This has been a talking point since training camp, and it continues to be a problem. Turnovers are critical for success, and it's something the Raiders need to focus on as they prepare for next season. The Raiders' offense continues to struggle, and it's clear this team isn't built to put up 40 points a game. The strategy going into the season was simple: rely on the defense to lead the way by creating turnovers and making big plays, while the offense supports by getting the ball into the hands of playmakers. Unfortunately, the defense hasn't delivered on that promise. While the defense hasn't been terrible in terms of points allowed, it hasn't forced enough turnovers to help the offense. On the other side, the offense has been plagued by turnovers of its own, creating a vicious cycle. Gardner Minshew, or MCH, isn't the type of quarterback who can compensate for these shortcomings, and that's become painfully clear. When Minshew went down, Desmond Ridder stepped in. However, Ridder's performance only reinforced what we already knew. He's not the answer. His time on the field was marked by poor decisions, multiple sacks, and a costly strip sack. While you could argue some of the blame falls on the offensive line, particularly the tackles, both quarterbacks showed a lack of pocket awareness. This has been a recurring issue with all 3 quarterbacks on the roster. At 2-9, it's obvious this season is over for the Raiders. Now, the focus needs to shift to development and individual improvements. Players like Jacoby Myers have shown they can be reliable. Myers isn't a true game-breaking playmaker. He won't outrun an entire defense, but he's an excellent route runner and has proven he's a legitimate wide receiver. Pairing him with a true number 1 receiver could transform the offense. Another bright spot was rookie tackle Paris Johnson. He had some dominant plays today, showing real potential as a key piece for the future. Finally, there's some positive news from around the league regarding draft positioning. The Tennessee Titans beat the Houston Texans, which is exactly what the Raiders needed. Wins from teams like the Titans, Jaguars, and Giants help improve the Raiders' draft outlook as they prepare to rebuild for next season. With the Tennessee Titans winning, they dropped from the 3rd to the 6th pick in the draft order, and the Raiders have now moved up to the 3rd overall pick. This puts the Raiders in a strong position as the season winds down. The draft order is subject to tiebreakers, primarily strength of schedule, and due to the competitiveness of the Raiders division, their strength of schedule is higher than teams like the Giants or Jaguars. If the Raiders finish with the 3rd overall pick, they'll likely have a shot at one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft. Even if the Jaguars secure the 1st pick, they're committed to Trevor Lawrence and are unlikely to take another quarterback. Instead, they might go for a difference maker like Travis Hunter or Will Johnson. However, there's always the chance of a trade. If a team like the New York Jets, sitting in the top 10, trades up for the first pick, it could shake up the draft. The New York Giants, having already moved on from Daniel Jones, are almost certain to take a quarterback. Many scouts favor Cam Ward as the top QB prospect in this class, meaning Shedeur Sanders could be available for the Raiders at pick 3. Either way, the Raiders must come away with a quarterback in this draft. However, beyond Ward and Sanders, the quarterback prospects drop off significantly. Jaden Milroe struggled in Alabama's loss and might return to school. Garrett Nussmeier's stock has dipped, though he remains a possible first-rounder due to his pro-ready traits. Similarly, J.J. McCarthy and Drew Aller have potential, but could choose to return for another year in college. Meanwhile, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders have exhausted their eligibility and are locks for this draft class. Some analysts argue that Sanders might be a reach as a top 5 pick, but others see him as a legitimate prospect. The quarterback class as a whole is weaker than initially expected, with only 1 or 2 clear first-round talents. There's even a scenario where the Raiders, sitting at pick 3 or 4, pass on a quarterback altogether. Instead, they could opt to follow a strategy like the Steelers, focusing on building a strong roster around a bridge quarterback while waiting for better draft opportunities in the future. Names like Will Johnson, Ashton Jeanty, or Travis Hunter could fill other pressing needs if the Raiders decide to hold off on drafting a quarterback. They might roll with Gardner Minshew for another year, or bring in someone like Justin Fields or Sam Darnold as a temporary solution. Ultimately, the next 2 to 3 months will be critical in evaluating this draft class and determining the Raiders' direction. While the team's playoff hopes are long gone, the focus now shifts to the future. What do you think about the Raiders' season so far? How do you feel about the potential quarterback options? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. See you next time.